In 1955, a Coke cost a nickel, a movie ticket a quarter, and the biggest question in a teenager's life was whether he'd get the family car on Saturday night. But here's what the history books leave out. Number 19 on this list got kids hauled into the principal's office so often that towns across America passed laws against it by 1958. And number 4 terrified parents so badly that Life magazine ran warnings about it. These weren't the greasers or the rebels you see in the movies. These were ordinary middle-class kids, the honor students, the class treasurers, the ones who mowed lawns for spending money. And what they got up to would stun the parents of today. Before we count down, hit subscribe, because some of these will make you wish you'd grown up in the age of the soda fountain. Let's start with number 25. Number 25. Saddle shoes, poodle skirts, and the daily war with the dress code. Every school morning began the same way for a middle-class girl in 1954. Bobby socks rolled just so, saddle shoes polished the night before, and a full skirt swishing at the knee. A pair of saddle shoes ran about $6, enough that a girl scuffed them at her peril and buffed them raw each Sunday evening. The poodle skirt, felt and wide enough to spin, became the uniform of an entire generation. But hemlines were policed like state secrets. Teachers carried rulers to measure the distance from knee to floor, and a girl caught in slacks might be sent home to change. Boys had their own rules. No untucked shirts, no denim, collars buttoned. The clothes look quaint now, but back then getting dressed was a small act of belonging, a daily proof that you knew the code. Number 24. Passing notes folded into tiny paper footballs. Long before phones buzzed under desks, there was the art of the note. A middle-class kid in 1956 could fold a scrap of loose leaf into a triangle so tight it could be flicked across 3 rows without a teacher noticing. The messages were small and enormous at once. Who liked whom? Who was mad at whom? Whether Betty was really going to the dance with Frank. Girls decorated theirs with hearts and secret codes. Boys kept theirs short. Getting caught meant the ultimate humiliation. The note read aloud to the whole class, or worse, tacked to the board. The risk was the whole point. In an era when a phone call meant your mother listening from the kitchen, a folded note was the only truly private line a teenager had, and it carried the weight of every secret worth keeping. Number 23. Fighting over the party line telephone. Most middle-class families in the early 50s didn't have a private phone line. They shared a party line with 2 or 3 neighbors, which meant you picked up the receiver and might hear Mrs. Henderson down the block already gossiping about the church bake sale. Teenagers were the natural enemies of the party line. A lovesick sophomore could tie up the wire for an hour, whispering into the heavy black receiver, while her father paced and the neighbors seethed. There was an etiquette to it, 3 short rings for one house, 2 long for another, and there was the thrill of quietly lifting the receiver to eavesdrop. Phone time was rationed like sugar. 5 minutes and off, fathers would bark. For a generation, the sound of a neighbor clearing her throat on the line was the sound of privacy ending. Number 22. Hauling home a stack of 45 RPM records. When the local 5 and Dime got its weekly shipment of 45s, middle-class kids were there with their allowance clutched tight. A single record cost about 89 cents, a real dent in a $1-a-week budget, so choices were agonized over at the listening booth. You'd carry your treasures home in a paper sleeve, drop the little plastic adapter into the big hole in the center, and play the same song 40 times until your mother threatened to throw the player out the window. Records were currency at parties and proof of your taste at school. A girl's record case, that boxy little suitcase full of singles, was as personal as a diary. Trading, lending, and borrowing 45s built friendships and started feuds. The music was tinny and scratchy, and it was the most important thing in the world. Number 21, bubblegum and baseball cards from the corner store. For a penny, later a nickel, a kid could buy a flat pink slab of bubblegum with a baseball card tucked inside, and the card mattered far more than the gum. Boys pinned prized players to bicycle spokes to make a motor-like clatter, never dreaming those flimsy cards would one day be worth fortunes. The chewing gum itself was a small rebellion, snapped and popped in the back of algebra class until a teacher confiscated it. Girls blew bubbles the size of their faces on the walk home. Bubblegum contests' biggest bubble wins were a lunchtime ritual. It was cheap, it was constant, and it left a wad stuck under 1,000 school desks. A generation measured out its afternoons in penny gum and the hope of pulling a good card. Number 20, sneaking comic books under the desk. Comic books cost a dime, and to a middle-class teenager in the early 50s, they were forbidden fruit. Parents, teachers, and even a famous psychiatrist warned that comics rotted the mind and bred delinquency. That only made them irresistible. Kids hid them inside textbooks, traded them behind the gym, and read them by flashlight after lights out. Westerns, romance, crime, and horror all passed hand to hand until the pages were soft as cloth. When a 1954 crackdown gutted the wildest titles, kids simply hoarded the old ones like contraband. A well-worn stack traded for a fair price on the schoolyard black market. The stories were lurid and cheap and utterly beloved, and half the fun was the thrill of getting caught. For a dime, a bored teenager could disappear into another world between class bells. Number 19, souping up hot rods and drag racing down Main Street. Here's the one that put kids in the principal's chair. By the mid-50s, a boy with a wrench and a beat-up Ford could turn a $50 jalopy into a roaring hot rod in his own garage. Stripped of fenders, chopped low, and tuned by ear, these cars were rolling badges of honor. The trouble started when two of them lined up at the town's main stoplight. The race was short, loud, and reckless, a quarter-mile blast down the same street where families shopped on Saturdays. Police cracked down hard, schools threatened expulsion, and by 1958, town after town had passed ordinances aimed squarely at teenage drag racers. Some cities built official drag strips just to get the kids off the streets, but the danger was the draw. Nothing said freedom to a middle-class boy like the smell of gasoline and a full tank. Number 18, screaming their lungs out at Friday night football. For a middle-class teenager, the Friday night football game was the center of the social universe. The whole town turned out under the lights, cheerleaders in sweaters, the band blaring the fight song, and students packed shoulder to shoulder on wooden bleachers. Pep rallies filled the gym all week, building the fever until kickoff. A big win meant a bonfire and a victory drive down Main Street with horns blaring. A loss meant a quiet, heartbroken bus ride home. The game was where boys became local heroes and where a girl might catch the eye of the quarterback. Admission cost a quarter, and the whole evening ran on hot cocoa and hope. Win or lose, everyone ended up at the diner afterward. For those few autumn Friday nights, a teenager felt like the most important person in the world. Number 17, learning to cook and build in home, EC, and shop class. The middle-class high school of the 50s split its students down the middle by gender, and few things showed it more plainly than home ec and shop. Girls filed into bright kitchens to master white sauce, hospital corners, and the proper way to iron a husband's shirt, all in preparation for a future everyone assumed was coming. Boys pulled on aprons in the woodshop, breathing sawdust as they cut dovetail joints and turned bowls on the lathe. The projects came home proudly. A lopsided spice rack, a batch of slightly burnt biscuits. There was pride in it, and there was also a whole world of assumptions baked into who learned what. A girl who wanted shop or a boy who wanted to cook ran straight into the wall of the era. For most, though, these classes were where you learned to make something real with your hands. Number 16, working after school as a soda jerk, sitter, or paper boy. Middle class didn't mean money handed over freely, and most teenagers earned their own. A boy rose before dawn to fling newspapers onto porches for a few dollars a week, collecting from customers door to door on Fridays. Behind the drugstore counter, the soda jerk pulled levers and built ice cream sodas with theatrical flair, earning maybe 40 cents an hour, plus the envy of every kid in town. Girls babysat for 50 cents an hour, wrangling other people's children while the parents went dancing. That money went straight into records, movie tickets, gasoline, and Saturday night. There was pride in a first paycheck and a lesson in every early morning. A job taught a 15-year-old the value of $1 in a way no classroom could, and it bought the one thing that mattered most: independence. Number 15. Ducking under desks for the bomb. Beneath all the malt shops and sock hops ran a current of genuine fear. These were Cold War kids, and the atom bomb was never far from mind. The air raid siren would wail, and a whole classroom would dive under wooden desks, hands laced behind necks, in the duck and cover drill drummed into every student. Some schools handed out dog tags so bodies could be identified. Families dug fallout shelters in the backyard and stocked them with canned goods. Teenagers grew up rehearsing the end of the world between spelling tests, and they learned to carry that dread lightly, joking about it the way kids joke about anything too big to face. It shaped them quietly, a generation that danced hard on Saturday because Monday's drill reminded them how fragile it all was. Number 14, going crazy for hula hoops and stuffing phone booths. The late 50s ran on fads, and middle-class teenagers threw themselves into every one. When the hula hoop arrived in 1958, more than 25 million sold in the first few months, and every driveway had a kid gyrating a plastic ring around the hips until dizzy. Then came the strangest craze of all, cramming as many students as humanly possible into a single telephone booth just to say they had done it. Contests broke out on campuses to set records, arms and legs pressed against glass. There were yo-yo championships, panty raids that made the papers, and dance marathons that lasted for hours. The fads were silly and fleeting and gloriously pointless. They spread by word of mouth and newsreel, and for a few weeks, each one felt like the most urgent thing in America. Then, just as fast, they vanished. Number 13, whispering all night at slumber parties with a transistor radio. For a middle-class girl, nothing beat a Friday sleepover. A gaggle of friends in pajamas rolled sleeping bags across the living room floor, armed with popcorn, nail polish, and secrets. They practiced dance steps, gossiped about boys, and prank-called the party line until someone's mother made them stop. The magic ingredient arrived late in the decade. The transistor radio, small enough to hide under a pillow, tuned low to a distant rock and roll station after the parents went to bed. Girls fell asleep to crackling music from a city hundreds of miles away. There were pillow fights and dramatic feuds and solemn oaths of eternal friendship. Nothing scandalous happened, but everything felt scandalous, and that was the point. A slumber party was where a teenage girl learned who her real friends were, one whispered confession at a time. Number 12, racing home to catch American Bandstand. When the last bell rang, middle-class kids across the country sprinted home for one reason: to plant themselves in front of the television for American Bandstand. The show, broadcast every weekday afternoon from Philadelphia, showed real teenagers dancing to the latest hits, and it set the rules for everything. If a couple on Bandstand did a new step, half of America was doing it by the weekend. Kids studied the dancers' clothes, their hair, and their moves the way scholars study scripture. Rating the new records, "It's got a good beat, and you can dance to it," became a national catchphrase. To be on the show was to be famous. To watch it was to know exactly what was cool that very week. For an hour every afternoon, a suburban living room became the coolest place in America. Number 11, cruising the main drag on Saturday night. Once a boy had his license and a set of keys, Saturday night meant one thing: cruising. Up and down the main street, slow and endless, windows down and radio up, Carload after carload of teenagers circled the same few blocks for hours. The point wasn't to get anywhere. The point was to be seen, to wave at friends, to pull alongside a car full of girls at a red light, and work up the nerve to talk. Gas cost about $1.25 a gallon, so $1 bought a whole night of freedom. The route always ended at the drive-in diner, then looped back for another pass. Parents worried, police watched, and the kids just kept circling, engines rumbling. Cruising was courtship, theater, and rebellion all at once, and for one generation, it defined what it meant to be young and free. Number 10. Ordering burgers from a car hop on roller skates. The drive-in restaurant was the natural home of the cruising teenager, and it ran on a beautiful piece of American theater, the car hop. A girl on roller skates would glide out to your window, hook a tray onto the door, and deliver burgers, fries, and a chocolate malt without you ever leaving the seat. A whole meal ran under $1. Cars packed the lot on weekend nights, radios competing, kids leaning out windows to trade insults and flirt across the rows. The food was greasy and glorious, and the real menu was social. Who was there, who they were with, who wasn't speaking to whom, it all played out over a tray of fries. The drive-in diner was a stage lit by neon, and every Saturday night the whole cast showed up. Nobody was in a hurry to leave. Number 9. Dancing in their socks at the sock hop. The sock hop got its name from a simple rule. To protect the polished gymnasium floor, kids had to take off their shoes and dance in their socks. Held right there in the school gym under crepe paper streamers, these dances were the heartbeat of teenage social life. A record player or a local band supplied the music. A chaperoning teacher supplied the disapproving looks, and the boys clustered nervously on one wall while the girls waited on the other. Then a fast song hit, and the whole floor erupted into jitterbugs and bops. Slow song sent hearts pounding as couples swayed at a carefully monitored arm's length. Admission cost $0.25, and the whole thing wrapped up by 10. But in those few sweaty hours in stocking feet, a shy sophomore might finally dance with the girl he'd been staring at all semester. Number 8. Steaming up the windows at the drive-in movie. By the mid-50s, the drive-in theater was booming, and teenagers knew exactly why it mattered. For about $1 a carload, you could pull into a giant lot, hook the tinny speaker onto your window, and watch a movie under the stars with a fair amount of privacy. Younger kids in pajamas piled into station wagons for the family show, but the late feature belonged to teenage couples. The movie itself was often beside the point. Between the snack bar runs for popcorn and the fogged-up windows, plenty of romances began in the back row of a parking lot. Parents fretted about passion pits, and drive-ins sometimes hired flashlight-wielding patrols to keep the young ones honest. It rarely worked. Under a summer sky with a double feature flickering ahead, a drive-in was as close to freedom as a middle-class teenager could get for $1. Number 7. Sculpting the perfect ducktail in the bathroom mirror. For the boys, grooming was a religion, and it started with a jar of Brill cream. "A little dab will do ya," the ads promised, and every middle-class boy spent long minutes at the mirror slicking his hair into place. The prize style was the ducktail, combed back on the sides to meet in a ridge at the back, with a wave curling over the forehead. It took a comb kept in the back pocket at all times, ready for a quick touch-up between classes. The look wasn't just vanity, it was identity, a careful signal of exactly what kind of boy you were. Some schools banned the wilder versions as too rebellious, sending boys home to wash the grease out, but the comb stayed in the pocket and the mirror stayed busy. A boy's hair in 1957 was a statement he made every single morning. Number 6. Wearing his ring, his jacket, and going steady. Long before it got complicated, teenagers had a simple system for love called going steady. And it came with badges you could see. A boy gave his girl his class ring, too big for her finger, so she wrapped the band in yarn or angora until it fit. On cold days, she wore his Letterman jacket, heavy wool with a leather sleeve, and his athletic letter stitched to the chest, a public announcement that she was spoken for. Some couples exchanged ID bracelets engraved with names. The whole school knew the score at a glance. Parents worried it was all too serious too soon, and Life magazine ran hand-wringing articles about children married at 15. But to the kids, it was the height of romance. To wear his jacket down the hallway was to belong to someone, and everyone could see it. Number 5. Gathering around the glowing new television set. In 1950, hardly any middle-class homes had a television. By the end of the decade, almost all of them did, and it changed everything. The whole family gathered in the living room around the flickering black and white screen, and teenagers had their own reasons to tune in. Variety shows, westerns, and comedies gave a generation a shared language. Everyone at school had seen the same thing the night before. But the television was also a battleground. Kids begged to stay up for the late show while parents guarded bedtimes. The single-family set meant negotiating what everyone watched, and the teenager rarely won against Dad and the news. Still, television knit the country together. It delivered the music, the fashion, and the idols that shaped teenage taste. That glowing box in the corner quietly became the most powerful voice in the American home. Number 4. Losing their minds over rock and roll and Elvis. Here's the one that made parents lie awake at night. When rock and roll exploded across the radio in the mid-50s, and when Elvis Presley swiveled his hips on national television in 1956, middle-class America panicked. Newspapers called the music a menace. Ministers preached against it. Some towns banned rock and roll records and canceled concerts. And Life magazine and others warned parents that this beat would corrupt their children. To the teenagers, of course, that only cranked the volume higher. They screamed at concerts, wore out records, and mimicked every move the idols made. Rock and roll was the first music that belonged to teenagers alone, not to their parents. And that was exactly its power. It was loud, it was electric, and it drew a line between the generations that has never fully closed. The kids were on the far side of that line, dancing. Number 3. Sweating over the perfect prom night. Of all the milestones, none loomed larger than the school dance, homecoming in the fall, and the prom in the spring. For weeks beforehand, it was all anyone could think about. A boy screwed up his courage to ask, then spent his savings on a wrist corsage and a rented tux. A girl agonized over a floor-length gown, an updo, and shoes dyed to match. Gyms and hotel ballrooms were transformed with streamers and cardboard stars into fairy tale worlds. A live band played, a king and queen were crowned, and couples swayed to slow songs under a mirror ball. Afterward came the group trip to the diner, still in formal wear, laughing until dawn. It cost a small fortune by teenage standards and meant everything. Decades later, those grainy prom photos remained some of the most treasured pictures a person owned. Number 2. Making the soda fountain the center of the universe. More than any other place, the soda fountain was where a middle-class teenager's world spun. Tucked into the corner drugstore, it had a long marble counter, spinning stools, and a jukebox in the corner loaded with the week's hits. After school, it filled with kids nursing cherry cokes, splitting a banana split 3 ways, and feeding nickels to the jukebox. A soda cost a nickel, a sundae a quarter, and a booth in the back could be held for hours on the price of a single malt. This was where romances bloomed and broke, where gossip traveled fastest, where the whole social order of the school played out over ice cream. The soda jerk knew every kid by name. For a generation, the sweet smell of that fountain, syrup and vanilla and possibility, was the very smell of being young. Number 1. Falling in love for the very first time. In the end, everything on this list circled back to one thing. Beneath the poodle skirts and the hot rods, the sock hops and the malt shops, These were kids feeling the first electric jolt of falling in love. It was walking a girl home from school carrying her books. It was a first shy dance at arm's length in the gymnasium. It was a note passed in class, a ring wrapped in yarn, a name whispered on the party line after the parents went to bed. Everything moved slower then, and somehow that made it burn brighter. A held hand at the drive-in could keep a teenager awake for a week. For all the poodle skirts and jukeboxes, what a 50s kid really did was fall in love for the first time in a world that felt brand new, and they never quite forgot it. There you have it, 25 things middle-class high school kids really did in the 1950s, from the soda fountain to that unforgettable first love. Which one surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. Tell me if your parents or grandparents lived any of these. And if this took you back, hit that subscribe button for more. Thanks for watching.